Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality, and is about discovering your place in this great universe, from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life, and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight we are going to be talking about what is the lineage that we have intersected in this lifetime. As we've shared on the show for over a decade now, we are this little bouncing ball of glitter as a soul, and we intersect with an ancestral lineage. We become the avatar. We download all the ancestral information within that lineage, and then it becomes that is who we are. It is where we've come from. It is what we look up on Ancestry.com. It is who we claim as ourselves. What happens when that lineage line starts to break down? What happens when it starts to overtake and influence your own future? What happens when you're there as someone in service and it is your mission to heal that lineage line going backward so it can disperse and dispense? What happens when you become very ingrained in it and you no longer want to be able to say, don't tell me about change, I don't want to know about it, this is who I am, these are my people, and I'm sticking to that story. So many different threads in the tapestry in which we are weaving in this time, 2023. And we are saying, I'm feeling I have to let go, I have to hold on, I have to be that, I have to be free. And we get very confused. We don't know what to do first. We don't know what to do last. And we just kind of sit down and say, woof, I just have to let this thing go. I don't know what it is, but it either has a mind of its own or else I have to delve into it and find out more information. Today is exactly that we'll be doing with my guest. The book is Heal Your Ancestral Roots, Release the Family Patterns That Hold You Back. My guest today is Anuradha Dayal-Gulati, and she will be definitely sharing how we can be able to focus, open up our minds and our thoughts, and let's get the job done. Anu, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jeanette. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you. Don't you think, Anu, that we are truly seeing how the tapestry has been woven over eons, and perhaps we are now letting it unfurl?
I think how you put it is so beautiful, a tapestry that we're allowing to unfurl. And a lot of times when we see the blessings in the family that we've born into, the blessings that we've received, we can be grateful. But oftentimes what we notice are the challenges we're dealing with. And it's hard to then look at it as this sort of tapestry that we're part of. It feels more like, oh my God, what am I dealing with?
Right. Do you think perhaps, just as I shared in the beginning of the show, it's when your soul intersects into this ancestral line, like we're on a trajectory course. It's like perpendicular. You kind of boom, and you're in it, you know. And you're downloading this Rolodex of all of the ancestors. You know, pretty much their qualities, who they are, what they're all about. And that's as we are as a child. Do you think perhaps, definitely it's your soul journey to have that intersection, but do you think perhaps we were not always given all of the answers, and as being the human, we were expected to work this out and figure it out?
Yes, I think that's so true. You know, in a lot of traditions, it's not just your ancestors are not just your parents and grandparents. Mm-hmm. It includes those who came up to 7 generations before you. So If you think about it, it's 252 mothers and fathers who need to have existed for you to be here today. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And it's like having 252 chapters that were written and scripted before you came on, and now all of a sudden you're, thrust onto the stage, and you don't quite know what's going on. You don't know your lines. You don't know how it's going to play out, and you're just like lost. And these characters are coming and going, and you're wondering, what exactly am I doing?
Right. But I think also, too, Anu, is that we start to look at characteristics, perhaps challenges, maybe blocks, maybe qualities within the ancestral lineage we are in that are reflecting in our own life. And many times they fit, many times they don't. And when they don't, I always liken it back. Hey, did you forget, soul? You had many other ancestral lineages you intersected with, too. So just as the petals on a sunflower, so to speak, there are many ancestral lineages that we have been before if we truly believe we are a soul eternal. Perhaps?
I think that's true, but so in my book, I just focus on the family that we're currently dealing with, because in the East, your soul karma is, what you've come to heal in this lifetime. And the family you're born into with its family karma is the family in which you have come to heal it. And it's quite, I don't really talk about this in the book, but what happens is in an ancestral lineage, you could be one of the ancestors. You could have done something, somewhere, and this is the family in which you've come to make amends. But what I like to focus on is that in this very family, you have taken on one piece of the ancestral lineage that you have come to heal. And when you heal that, you heal those who came before you. And, we are the ancestors of those to come. So when we shift, when we heal those who will come after us. So it's like we are able to heal up and down the lineage.
Right. Also, too, Anu, let's think about the concept that people do show up. Their spirits and souls do come around, as we shared, in the lineage again. I know for myself, my sister died before I was born, and my daughter is her soul rebirthed. So we think about that. That happens, I won't say all the time, but infrequently in many lineages, because they're coming back within the same context to be able to do the work, to be the one that's the clearer, to be the one that's going to shake up the family, to be the one that's going to say, it's now the time to heal this lineage and to carry that staff, so to speak. Because if you look in the year 2023, we would not be doing this type of work in the 1980s or the 1940s. It's truly now that we're being asked to open up so much more if we're ready. Do you think?
Yes, I think so. I feel that almost as if this is the time the ancestors have been waiting for. I was supposed to publish this book last year, but, divine providence delayed it till this year because I think this was the time. So there is something about it, and there's a lot of interest in ancestry right now and the ancestors and how healing can happen.
Right.
So it feels like this is the time. And I want to talk a little bit about what you said, that this idea of you're the one who's come to heal the lineage. And a lot of times I will listen to clients and, they might be saying, I'm the one who does all the repair work. I'm the one who's doing all the patching up. I'm the one who's reaching out to family. And it can feel burdensome. But I think I wish people could understand and realize that healing the family lineage is a really sacred task.
Right.
And if you feel you're the one doing the work, you have been the one chosen for it. And as you do it, the universe comes to support you.
What I think also, too, Anu, is that just to take the words, you're the one doing the work, versus saying, I'm the one that has to clean up the bathroom. I'm the one that has to clean the car. I'm the one that has to make the meals. I'm the one that has to save everybody, so to speak. If we could flip the coin and just say, I'm in service and in the mission, that's what my lifetime is, versus I'm the one that has to do, I think that shift in consciousness is really what will set you free, and you'll start seeing yourself in a different light, perhaps?
Yes, that is so true, because it's what you're talking about, which is the shift from resentment to acceptance. And acceptance just simply opens the portal to change, because when you think about it, if you think about all our ancestors, or even our most immediate parents or grandparents, we can't really fix them. We can't go back and change the incidents or events or history of that time, whether it was depression, war, anything else that made them who they are. And so if we, embark on this journey of having to fix them, it's, it becomes really frustrating. But shifting to what you said, acceptance, then opens the way to moving forward with your own life. Because you're not trying to fix the past. You're just trying to move forward.
Yeah. And I think also, too, you don't want to move forward with the aspect or the crutch or the imprint of the past, because you don't want to say, well, I see all of that from the past, and now I'm going to be the preventer. I'm going to put up walls and make sure nobody goes outside of the lines. I'm going to always be the one who catches everyone before they fall, or share the old stories so that they aren't repeated in the future. So I think sometimes it's really you have to really be in cognizant awareness of that, because sometimes people do that. They say, well, I'm healed everybody, and I'm reminding everybody we're not going to do it like the old ways, we're going to do it the new way. But the new way seems to be very limited. Perhaps?
Yes. There's a beautiful African proverb that I love that sort of captures the dilemma. And it says, when you cut your chains, you free yourself. When you cut your roots, you die. So that state of honoring your ancestors, of accepting them, is allowing inside of you to understand that these are my roots. This is where I came from. And when you cut your chains, you actually free yourself. You free yourself from limiting beliefs, from fear that this will repeat again. You're just focusing on the here and now, on the full expression of yourself.
Right.
And that's part of what we're here for, to honor what we came from, but to stand in the full expression of ourselves in this journey to being all we came to be. And that's sort of like almost like a tightrope that you walk on.
Yeah, I think that just as you shared, there has to be a time when you per se hit the wall, or you're standing at the door, and we all know that old adage. Either you can open the door and go through and close it behind you. You can sit down in front of the door and just be stuck. Or you can look at the door and you say, no way, and you go back the other way, And I think all of us have had all of those opportunities within our lifetime. Don't you think?
Yes, we've all had those opportunities. And I think this is where, when you talked about living intentionally, your biggest superpower is conscious choice, to make that decision to live intentionally, to move forward, leaving resentment, anger, the baggage. The baggage is really emotional baggage.
Mm-hmm.
And then move forward.
Yeah. I think the fear is, what will I lose? The fear is, what will I gain? They have them on both sides, so to speak, when you start to explore concepts of change or beliefs or truths or looking at things for what they really are in your life versus how they have appeared in the past. So many times people will say, an event happened in a family, and when you're going through it, you have one perception of it. You can quantify and qualify it up and down. And that's the story, and everybody sticks to it, And they use it as a validation going forward. And then when they go forward, maybe about a decade or two later, they look back, the story shifts, and it changes. Then you say, okay, now the next generation, the story shifts and changes again. But is there truly underlying qualities of the story that don't change, and that's what you're really talking about, healing the roots?
I think that's so true, that stories change, and there are stories that are held very closely,
mm-hmm.
and that don't really change. Who is the black sheep? Who is, the victim? Who's the perpetrator? And one of the ways in which I have seen that sometimes can be helpful, there's this idea of journaling in the morning. And sometimes when you journal, or if you're journaling consistently, you can find that the stories are getting rewritten. And the idea is, can you rewrite the story in a compassionate way? Seeing that people perhaps were doing the best they can with the circumstances that were available to them and the challenges that were available to them. So the more you can rewrite the story with compassion, the more you can free yourself from the story. Because
mm-hmm.
part of it is learning the lessons, but part
right.
of it is seeing your backstory with compassion. And as long as in the rewriting of it through the generations, there is compassion, it's always helpful in the rewriting. Because we things that happen over time, whatever was correct or appropriate in the 50s wasn't in the 60s, wasn't in the 70s. And like you said right at the start, now we are in this time. And things that were appropriate then are not appropriate now. So in the rewriting of stories, we start to see perhaps with a softer gaze, with a softening of the heart, and less judgmental.
Right. Because I think also, too, Anu, as we reflect on the stories of many decades before, we can look back at the stories, but we don't have to collect shame and guilt or regrets. And I think those are the three biggest words that people really tend to carry when they look back at their ancestors' stories, and then they start carrying that for them. And it's not about carrying their shame, regret, or guilt, or their pain or their despair. It's about being able to find and flip the coin and find unconditional love, to find compassion and empathy, to be able to be open and aware of the circumstances, of the stories, and to be able to accept everything as it is, as perfect. Perhaps?
Yes, I do agree, Dr. Jeanette. This is actually so true, because when we are looking at the ancestral stories, and sometimes we do not have access to them, there's a lot of feeling of guilt and shame.
Right.
And even intellectually, if you say, I do understand, I need to shift it, healing really happens at the level of the heart, and it can be hard to shift these emotions from the heart. And I think this is why in a lot of Eastern traditions and in the Native American traditions, there were periods of the year where you honored the ancestors, where you made offerings for their souls to be in peace. Because the shame, guilt, regret, the emotions that we're feeling is the unresolved emotions of our ancestors. Because when they step, outside of the physical body, they want to make amends, and they cannot make amends. And it's only through us that they are actually able to repair and make amends. So this is what we're picking up on. But when we start to honor them, we allow them to sort of, shift off the earth plane, to not be as trapped. And by, accepting whatever blessings we might have received, by accepting and acknowledging their challenges, and then as we start to honor them, we are able to release some of these emotions. It allows us to sort of make peace with what was and peace with where we are today.
Right. Absolutely. Anu, can you share now? We'll talk about the flower essences, because these are a tool that you've shared in your book. You've outlined it for better than half of the book, but it's about utilizing the power of nature to be able to shift your own energy. Because if we think about it, so many times people will say, but I'm just a human. I don't get it, that energy stuff. I think you need to come into focus about understanding energy first, and how your aura, how you're feeling around you, how you sense things around you, and start opening up there to be able to understand. And then once you do that, you can connect with nature or see something that may be calling to you and using it as your healing tool. Isn't that how you share about flower essences?
Yeah, so that's, beautifully put. And I think there's a couple of things that I'd like to share. One is I feel we are brought up on this myth that we are rational beings who have emotions, sort of as a kind of appendix to the whole part of being human. We're basically rational. But if we flipped it and we said, really, we're emotional beings who rationalize, then we start to give our emotions center stage. And we start to recognize that they really have value. So when we're picking up on the emotions of our ancestors, when we're picking up on the feelings that keep repeating in our lives from incidents that keep repeating in our life, we want to release them. And it's hard to release it intellectually because that has to happen at the level of the heart. And, I feel this is where our connection with Mother Nature starts to become really important, because ultimately she's the mother of all mothers, mother of all fathers. And flower essences, we can think of them as medicine from Mother Nature directly.
Right.
Because our remains, whether we are cremated, buried, they never leave the earth. We are here. Our bodies are always part of this earth. And flowers are just the highest expression of the earth in some way. And flower essences can be thought of as wildflower infusions in spring water that are preserved with brandy. So it's the energetic vibration of the flower. It's similar to dew that was sort of always considered sacred in many ancient cultures, in many ancient traditions. But, it's challenging to create dew or to recreate it or collect enough. So in the 1930s, a British surgeon, Dr. Bach, he actually found a way to recreate and stabilize the energetic properties of flowers. And that's really what we get in terms of flower essences. So, that's how they support us, because they work at the level of the emotion, because emotion is just a frequency. Guilt, shame, grief, they all vibrate at the lowest frequencies, but then you uplift them with flower essences that shift those frequencies. Crabapple for shame, holly for anger, Star of Bethlehem for grief, and they lift the frequencies of those emotions.
I think also, too, Anu, that if you look through history, society and our collective had it correct, because flowers were always used to be able to enhance because you always would smell them, but also for their beauty. They were the hands at weddings, funerals, when you were sick in the hospital, and people would send flowers. I even said to my kids the other day, when did people stop sending flowers? Y'all haven't sent me flowers in decades. What's up? And you look at it and you say they really have a energetic flow to them. You could even just hold a bouquet of flowers. You could even just go to the grocery store, which I do. I have this thing where I tell everyone, if you really want to uplift your day, go into the grocery store, and right in the front they always have the flowers, or most stores do. And you go over there and you smell every single one of them, or whatever is called to you. Breathe it in and you don't have to buy it or pick it up or carry it, just smell it. And see how it changes your process through the store or your day. So I always liken flowers and trees and nature back to saying, it's your soul asking, I need a comforting place to land. Can you offer that? And that's what flower essences do. It's the essences saying, yes, we welcome you in. We can offer you that comfort of that place to land. Don't you think?
Yes, and what they really do is they reconnect you to yourself.
Right.
So, for instance, when clients come with an issue or something they're struggling with, I don't really give advice because I don't know if you should leave a marriage. I don't know if you should leave your job or ask for the promotion. But when I'm listening for the emotions, I will just give the flower essences corresponding to those emotions, and then the flowers do their work. And somebody will come back and say, this is how I shifted or this is how I changed. Because the flower essences are allowing you to tap into your internal guidance system, sense of trusting yourself. Because the message of, we're rational beings, we always get, oh, you're too emotional, you're too sensitive, get over it, don't bring it. And so we stop trusting ourselves. We stop believing in ourselves. And the essences are bringing you back to yourself.
Mm-hmm. It really is that humans have really been shut down. If you look at it before the pandemic, people were really at a precipice point. I mean, they were hanging over the edge. They were doing and getting and being all of this outside influences. And when the pandemic happened, it shut them down. To sit their behinds down in a chair, and it's almost like you were back in kindergarten. It was like, now it's time to listen a different way, open up, connect, let go, clean out. How many people do we see on social media that were cleaning their house, I mean, vacuum cleaners, they went through the ceiling because people didn't do and take care of themselves and the space around them. And we think about it, it's clearing out your mind, clearing out your body, clearing out your old thoughts and old beliefs that a lot of the flower essence help with. But what the specific purpose, I think, is that we are allowing ourselves to, as you share in your book, blossom. And when you're able to blossom, it's sort of like the flower will find its way. So have no fear that you're going, if you're stuck and you can't get around it, say, have no fear, you will find your way. And flower essences are almost like, they take a little bit of time and they say, we're going to be okay, that yes, we're able to find our way to the sun, to blossom. Isn't that what essences do?
Absolutely, because it's almost like it is our birthright to blossom.
Right.
When we look at the lineage, when you heal yourself, actually, it's like as if there is a Y or U-shaped hole in the universe that only you can fill with your work, with your healing when you have healed yourself. And that's really what you came to do. If you leave with never having, shifted that past that you're carrying or the way in which you're carrying it,
right,
that hole always stays unfilled. And it's just, you coming back to yourself with the support of the flowers, with the support of Mother Nature, and actually with the support of your ancestors as you begin the healing journey. And you find your purpose, your fulfillment, what you came to do in this lifetime.
Right.
So you become the blossom of your family tree. Your birthright is to blossom.
Yeah. Do you think, Anu, that also, too, it's about calling in your ancestors, it's about calling in the tools that you have and calling in all of the energy and the power beings to be able to support you in this process? Sometimes people think, oh, you mean I have to go on this process and this journey myself, and I'm going to be damaged or hurt or be unknown. And really, in essence, you talk about prayer and an altar, meditation, connection. All of these things are very important to be able to guide you along the journey that you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So, Dr. Jeanette, when we're talking about blossoming, we can blossom when we come home to ourselves. And so I created this acronym HOME, which H is to honor your ancestors, O is to observe your emotions, M is to magnify your spiritual connection, and E is to engage with Mother Earth. And if it's okay with you, I would just like to sort of touch on each of these a little bit. We've talked a lot about the ancestors, but honoring them, gives you, it sets you free, really. Observing your emotions, acknowledging your emotions is also really important. And, we've been given, again, messages that, such and such is a negative emotion. So, for instance, if you take jealousy is considered a negative emotion. But if you think about it, jealousy is just telling you, I want what she has. And there might be a feeling of sadness underlying the jealousy. I can't have it. Or I wanted it and I couldn't have it, bitterness, or like I don't know how to get that. So there's an element of fear, not knowing the way forward. So a negative emotion is an invitation to reconnect with yourself in a supportive way, in a compassionate way. And positive emotions, like peace or harmony or happiness, are areas in your life where you have reconnected with yourself. So observing your emotions for the messages they're telling you then becomes key. And I want to talk about the spiritual connection because, we have the law of karma, family karma, but there is also grace surrounding you. And it makes its presence felt in little ways. So you pay attention and you notice and you see in little ways that you are being supported. And as you do that, you can open yourself up to trusting the universe that it will be there to support you. And the last, as we talked about, is Mother Earth. Connecting with her, whether it's through flower essences, walking in nature, it just brings you back home to yourself.
Also, too, Anu, I think sometimes if we say, I see all the flower essences out there, they're listed in books, all the qualities are down there, and sometimes people will say, well, goodness, I could take every single one of those. There's like no real guidance. And I've shared with many times with people, I'd say, what is the one plant, tree, flower, or grass that's outside of your door? What's there? You notice it all the time? Or it seems to call to you. Like either you're saying, oh, I think you need pruning today, or oh, you have beautiful flowers today, or oh, goodness, you need water. What is the one thing that's connecting with you? And start there. I know for myself, I live in New Orleans, and there is magnolia trees on the property that I'm on. There's at least maybe 100 of them. And when they blossom all sometimes in this real profound one day. Seems like every single one of them has 100 blossoms. So we've got thousands of magnolias blooming in this one day. And I went out one day, and I had collected some water from rainwater. And I put it in a glass bowl, and it was collected. And I put a magnolia blossom inside of it. And I'll tell you, that water was so powerful. I put it in a jar, closed it tight. I didn't use any preservatives or anything. And you could put your hands around that, and you can feel the support of the magnolia flower because it calls to you in your mind. You think of it when the process of collecting it. You can feel the energy within the glass jar, and then you connect with a thought of what that represents to you. Isn't that the process around essences?
I think you can connect with them in so many different ways, and like you said, you can do that as well. I think the way Dr. Bach did it, which is where I certified and trained in them, those are wildflowers, so they're not from any garden or they're just from the wild. And there were researchers at the University of Glasgow, and they identified 4 key emotions: fear, anger, sadness, and joy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we're cycling in the first 3, fear, anger, and sadness. And what he did, Dr. Bach, is he took the nuances of each emotion. So, for instance, in fear, it was like, can you speak about the fear? Do you not want to speak about it? Is it just too much? You don't want to share it? Or are you afraid for those you love? Or are you just so terrified that you're rooted to the spot? So based on the nuances of the emotion, he identified 38 flower essences. And, while I offer a starter kit on my website of, just a list of essences, I don't sell anything on it, I've found that some of the common essences that most people need are holly for anger or jealousy, willow for bitterness. There's usually Star of Bethlehem for grief. So there are some key essences that almost everybody needs at some point to start the journey. And then as you start the journey, nature calls to you in different ways. And, like you said, you're drawn to the color of the magnolias, the richness of multiple trees in bloom, and the power of them in the water. So nature reaches out to nurture us, and we become more sensitive to it. So you can start anywhere. And there are many places to start, but they all take you to the same place where you start to trust yourself and you start to listen. Mm-hmm. And I love the image of the magnolia trees in bloom. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's very important to also be able to say, that old phrase, stop and smell the roses? I think that the pandemic also opened that up to us where we could stop and see what's around us, what's calling to us within our emotions, within nature. Because a lot of people were totally shut down. They were on RoboForce, You have to pay the bills, take care of your kids, make sure they're smart enough for this, that, or the other, make sure everybody is accounted for all the time, and they were really pushing the envelope, so to speak. And now, as we look at it in the year 2023, we're really at a precipice point, what I call, is that where people are saying, I want to get back to normal, and they're trying to tread water to get back to where they were before, and yet others are saying, I'm done with that. I want to live off the grid. I want to have less things in my life. I want to declutter what I'm wading through each day. And when you do that, other qualities and other feelings start to surface, but yet you have a clearer mind and you're able to work through them. So just as you shared, you could start with one remedy, and it will clear the air, so to speak, clear the fog, and you'll start to say, oh, I'm doing okay. And then something will come to you and you will say, well, maybe not so. Let's work here. So you're really going about it in a very concise way versus just dumping all of these. You see sometimes people will come to me and they want supplements to be able to, quote, cure them. And they've got 30 bottles. And it's like, are you just dumping everything to try to fix something inside of you? Or are you trying to be able to work the process to help heal yourself? Two different things, don't you think?
Yeah. Yes. And I think, it takes a lot of courage to start on the healing journey, to actually open yourself up and say, I want things to shift. Show me how. But when you start to ask the question, what do I need to do differently? How can I change things? Then I think the universe actually sends you little signals to open and expand the sort of box that you're living in. And it becomes bigger, wider, more expansive. And then as you start, you're like, I want to continue this. It feels lighter. It feels more expansive. It feels better. And then the process starts, and it starts to just take you down a path, because then you're living more intentionally. You're living with greater awareness, as opposed to just, going through the motions of surviving and getting through routines and rituals that take you through the day instead of making your day and life more meaningful.
Right. And also, too, to be open and aware that the universe is supporting you. So it's not only that you're doing something and giving out, so to speak, you're also receiving from nature, you're receiving from the universe, and you're creating a cycle, so to speak, versus just a one-way street. Sometimes people are saying, you're asking me to do something else again. I can distinctly remember I had this patient, probably was about maybe 40 years ago, and I had written up a sheet for her, and she says, my goodness, look at all this stuff. I already have a job. I just wanted one thing to be able to fix me. And it was like, okay. But then maybe 20 years later, she came back and she said, it took me 20 years to work through that sheet, but now I understand what you were talking about. So I think the idea is that wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're kind of holding on to, or whatever's coming up to your door, understand it and say thank you. Because no matter what it is, you were brought there for a purpose and a reason. And I think sometimes people want to cast it out and say, oh, not again. But the answer is thank you. So gratitude, honor, and awareness is very much an important part of healing your ancestral lineage, don't you think?
Yes, because ancestral healing really, Dr. Jeanette, is releasing the feeling that you're a victim of what came before you. Mm-hmm. And it's releasing the feeling that you're a victim in your life. And, they say that only an adult can leave the family of origin. And what that really means is an adult will take responsibility for their life, for their emotions, for their actions. A child always is like, somebody else is going to do this. I have to look up to someone else. So, sometimes when you go back to meet a parent or grandparent or relative who might have always made you feel small, if you go back and see them and you're like, I'm back where I was before, but it's because you're back in that childhood place. If you go back as an adult, letting go of resentment, claiming yourself, reclaiming your power, you go back and the interaction is different. You suddenly see all of those things that were being projected onto you coming out of their own insecurities, out of their own traumas, either with a big T or a little t. And you start to set yourself free. So really releasing the feeling of being a victim of whatever it is starts to set you free.
Right. Well, in closing also, too, Anu, I think the word trauma has really been a tag word, what we call a word of the generation. And as so many people are saying, well, what is that word all about? How do I have to phase through it? And does trauma need to show on my physical being, or can I have trauma within self? And I think trauma has always been around there. It's just now that we've shifted and used it as pretty much the tag word of the season, don't you think?
Yeah, and at some level it's good that it's entering the lexicon because it's greater awareness that someone might be acting in a certain way because of what happened to them. And transgenerational trauma is really the energy of unresolved emotions.
Right.
So, emotions are really what connect us to everything, to our ancestors, to the invisible world of, the universe, where we get support from, and higher emotions that lift us up. So it's just all about emotions. And trauma is really, again, it's an unprocessed story because at that moment, everything was too much to process it. And so as your sort of prefrontal cortex starts to take over and you start to live intentionally and with greater awareness and you start to develop the frameworks, then the part that couldn't hold it, suddenly you start to have the language and the framework and the understanding in a safer way to process what might have happened. And then you can start to release it and shift it. But without sort of creating that safe container in which you can start to see what happens or what happened, I think it's very hard to go there.
Yeah, because if you look at trauma, it's really what happened to you and how did you respond? What happened that really just took you out, or how did you respond and work your way life going forward? And we all have different stories at different times of our life, different phases. We meet different people. They help us shape-shift our story. We have illnesses that will either take on more control, our stories will drift to the back, or else they'll become the forefront of our life. I think many times over the generations of our lifetime, Anu, we've all been in many different places in this phase. But now we're being asked to step up from the phase and to reflect on what's happening to us, perhaps?
Yes, and reflection, I feel, Dr. Jeanette, is an intentional act, and it brings things to the surface, which can be hard to see, Sometimes it's easier to not see than to see, but if you find the courage to see, then you start to, again, release the story that is embedded inside of you that, you couldn't bear to see. And I think this is why it's so important to be compassionate to yourself, to be compassionate to the 17, 18, 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 30-year-old, 40, whatever it is that couldn't process or deal with what was going on. But you, now, as the adult self, as the wiser self, can be compassionate because that young person at that time had no words, had no framework to understand what was going on. And so recognizing that, it also allows you to release some of the guilt and shame and anger, which may be directed to someone else, but a part of it is also directed inward at yourself.
Yeah.
So kindness to yourself allows you to shift that.
As I work with patients at end of life, I find there is so much anger, grief, regret, despair, and, oh gosh, you can give it every kind of negative connotation you want, because pretty much the elders around this decade right now that are maybe in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, they've got a lot of that pent up, and they've been holding on to it like nobody's business, and a lot of stories and secrets, and they just refuse to let it go. And we see a lot of people kind of get to death's door, and then, all of a sudden, a miracle. They're better again, and they get to the door again, and it keeps bouncing back and forth because they aren't ready to let go yet. They're still saying, I fear the next step. So the next step is the release of all they've been holding on to. Don't you think?
Well, and as you said, if they don't release and they move on, well, guess who has to do the work? We have to do the work. So it's not like it suddenly disappears altogether. their energy just comes back around us. And that's why the practices that we do, creating an ancestral altar is actually a way of anchoring energy and supporting them and releasing those emotions and lifting up and off and out of our lives. It was thought that ancestor worship was what, a lot of indigenous traditions or Native American traditions did. But people were not praying to their ancestors. They were praying for their ancestors. There's a medical anthropologist, Alberto Villoldo, and he said, when you found the altars in South America, we thought they were like for ancestor worship. He's like, no. He said, if you know where your ancestors are, then you can, it's better, because otherwise they're running amok, ruining your life. But when you know where they are, when you anchor that energy, when you pray for them to be in peace or harmony, you can allow them to release some of the things you're talking about and lift to a higher plane. So they're not acting as a ceiling or as a block in your life.
Right. Well, Anu, I think we had a great time talking today, because a lot of times people are saying, well, I don't want to go back to normal, but I don't know what the future holds. However, I want to create a better future for myself and the people around me. Many people are craving that like nobody's business. They just don't know how or where to find that stepping stone, so to speak. They feel like they're living in that void, where they know they can't go back the old way because that door is closed. However, now they're at the forefront of saying, I'm in the unknown, show me, guide me. And definitely flower essences and their story today is a way to be able to be guided out of that space and time. So we thank you so much for joining us to be able to share that guidance.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Jeanette. It's been a pleasure to talk with you and be on your show. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you. Can you share, Anu, how to find out more information about your work? That would be wonderful.
It's on my website, healyourancestralroots.com. And there is, if anyone wants, there's a download on that where you can download like the 10 key essences for your relationship based on my work with clients. And it also tells you how to use them, how to create your own bottle of flower essences, and what are the differences with relative to essential oils. So it has all that information on it, and anyone can just download it. And then, of course, there's my book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots.
Very good. Well, Anu, it was such a pleasure. We thank you so much for sharing your inspiration, hope, and joy with us today. So thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you.
If you'd like to find out more information about Anuradha Dayal-Gulati, please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to her website for more information about her book, Heal Your Ancestral Roots, and her work. And definitely check out the download. It sounds very interesting to be able to help guide you. If you want to find out more information and say, this seems gentle, this is something I can start with, and perhaps this is something that will bring me into a different level of awareness, a guidance, opening up, and helping to heal myself, perhaps the people around me, and saying, we got this. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette-Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit dr.jeanette-gallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.